club. So this is just very quick. Why don't you stay up here? One of the fun things I get to do is assistant governors to give out awards sometimes. So this is actually an award that your club won last year. Too bad Bob's not here because it's actually part of his year, but you're all part of this. It's not just the president, right? So I'm here to present with you the Rotary International Presidential Citation for your 2017-2018 Rotary year for the achievement of a bunch of goals. I don't remember what they are, but there's a bunch of, about levels of service, levels of foundation giving, involvement in the community, all kinds of things. So I'm just happy to present this to you. We're the Rotary Club of Wellesley for helping Rotary make a difference in the lives of people all over the world. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Susan. Okay, good. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
We can put that up in the barn, huh?
Yeah.
Okay. So we have the pleasure of having a great speaker here tonight. So, if I can read my handwriting. Janet Bircher is the president of Transformation Management, LLC. Provides professional facilitation for, I can't read this, Janet, I'm sorry. Anyway. I read before, and I know that you're a very accomplished speaker, and we're going to, but anyway, Jen holds an MBA with a concentration in organization development from Boston College. Certifications include Myers-Briggs, Lego Serious Play, Immunity to Change, the Cape Cod model for GISC. She's written a book called Zoom Leadership. Yes. And it was only published last year, right? It's a brand new book. It's published in 2017, so we're anxious to hear what you have to say, Janet.
Great, thank you. Thanks so much. I think you lifted my agenda.
No.
You did.
I don't want anybody to try to outshine you. It won't be very hard. There goes another one of your problems.
Take a break.
Oh, it's on. Thank you.
Well, I think it's important to have fun when you learn, right? So, what's the first thing someone asks you when you get home at the end of the day?
Did you have a good day?
Did you have a good day? And if you're really lucky, it's did you have a good day, honey? So I've been interested in this for as long as I can remember. How was your day? How was your work day? How was your job today? How are you doing? And ever since I was an undergrad, and I worked even in high school, I always wanted to work. I don't know why. I think that's maybe not common, but I was curious about work and I was interested in work. And I always felt like it was a way to engage, much the way Rotary is a way to engage in the community, it's a way to engage. So when I finished undergrad, I went to work for human resources in that kind of role. And I did what I could to make benefits be more competitive, compensation be more generous, and policies be more fair. I thought that would be great. And then when I started my own business, so that was for about 20 years, I was the head of HR for different organizations. And when I started my own business, I thought, well, what have I learned from all these years in the working environment about what managers need? What do they need to get good at what they're doing? What do they need to get better? What do they need when they're at the top of their game and they still want to strive and improve? And here's what an average workday would be for me. In the morning, a knock comes on the door. And in comes one of the managers I support, all angry and red in the face. And what do you think he's there to complain about?
Help.
The help, right? Staff, people. And in the afternoon, there I am in my HR office, and in comes an employee. Angry or near tears, and what are they there to complain about?
Bosses.
You got it, exactly. So that's what I got really curious about. Why does that happen? How does that happen? What can we do about it? Well, one of the things that I think isn't exactly fair is we don't give managers good training. Now, would you cross a bridge designed by an engineer with no training? Would you see a medical professional who had no training? No. But we expect managers who have no training to be responsible for the biggest line item of most companies' budget. What is that?
Salaries.
Exactly. So there they are responsible for salaries. We give more training to baristas than we give to managers. How fair is that? That's not fair. So we're going to change the world here today, guys. One leader at a time. So I lost my place. So a key aspect of leadership is decision making. Now, when you're faced with a decision, you can do a lot of research, you can talk to other people, you can look it up, you can do what you can, but you still might be confused about which way to go. So the two sides of the same coin we were talking about was the people complaining about management, decisions. Sometimes you don't know where to begin. Sometimes you're stumped. You've got a decision, you don't know what to do, and sometimes actually you have too many options. Has that ever happened? You've got so many options. How do you narrow it down? Where do you begin? Which way do you go? So I like to think of it as a search engine inside your brain. Whether you think of your brain as a computer or a library, or sometimes a computer and sometimes a library, wouldn't it be great if you had a search engine inside your own brain to help you make a decision? So I came up with a model that I would like to say does that. It's designed to improve leadership skills, decision-making skills, and to change the world one leader at a time. That's where we're going. And then you'd be joyful. So we're going to talk about this model. I like to think of it as a new recipe with familiar ingredients. So, if any of you have ever cooked or even made a sandwich, you get the idea, right? You might have the same concept but new ingredients, or so there's 4 lenses and the idea of zooming. So zooming we're now all familiar with because of phones and cameras. In the old days, remember maps? Remember AAA would do a big red marker on your paper maps? But now look what we've got. Zooming in and zooming out. So what's the benefit of zooming in? What do you get when you zoom in? Detail. What do you get when you zoom out?
Perspective.
Exactly, perspective. So that's where we're going. So what's this?
Awful.
Bacteria.
Now what do you think it is?
Cantaloupe.
All right, so we were zoomed really in. Now we're zoomed out. You can tell what it is. Now we're zoomed out more. You can see the whole thing. Now we zoom out even more, and you can see the context. You can see it growing in the field. Now, somebody who's a better grower than me said that's upside down. Actually, no one's only do that, but whatever. You get the idea. So the more you zoom out, the bigger your context becomes. Now on the left, what's that?
Balloons.
Oranges.
Actually, Gore had a Halloween event where they lifted up pumpkins and dumped them out of that bucket. Why? I don't know. But they did, and it made a good picture. So the natural assumption when you quickly see something that's familiar, you draw a conclusion, right? You get a little scan of information and draw a conclusion. But if you zoom in this case, you get closer and you can almost smell Halloween, right? So it gives you a different visceral experience. It's not only visual, but your memory's involved. You've seen a pumpkin, you know what it is, you know what time of year it is, you know what it smells like, you carved it, you scooped it. Even if you can recognize something, when you zoom out, you have a different sense of it. So you knew that was a tulip, and yet as you zoom out, you get a bigger sense, a different sense of the environment, of the field that it's in. So now I want you to pair off with somebody next to you and talk about which one is your strength. Do you tend to zoom in first? You start zooming in. Of course, everybody does both. We all do close, we all do far. But pair off with a person next to you and say, you know, my real strength where I start is, and then whether it's close in or far out, just take a minute at your tables. It's about to split. All right, interesting. So now you've got the first part of the recipe. Now you understand that. Now we're going to talk about the second part of the recipe, which is this concept of what lens are you focused on. So in the think lens, and I usually start with think because I work as an executive coach with leaders usually being promoted or in line for succession or involved with a merger and acquisition or reorganization. So they start logically. So zoomed in, the think lens would be things like budget or a pro-con list or a weighted point factor system. That kind of analysis is very logical, excuse me, zoomed in. Zoomed out, the think lens might be something like a strategic plan, or whether to open another shop in another town, whether to buy a building or develop an affiliation, an affiliate relationship. That would be the think lens zoomed out. The act lens is the second most common, although I do have some clients who operate under the fire, ready, aim instead of ready, aim, fire. So some clients are in the act lens first. And act, zoomed in, would include things like send an email, make a phone call, interview a candidate, place an ad. That would be taking action in a zoomed in small way. Zoomed out, act might be meet with a new advisor or have a layoff or develop a new product line. So that would be act zoomed out in a more strategic. So now you're kind of combining. I'm describing them as if they're separate, but of course there's overlap. I'm only describing them separately for clarity. So that's the act zoomed out. Feel, I think, has gotten a lot more attention since Daniel Goleman published his, I like to think of it as standing in someone's shoes. When Daniel Goleman published Emotional Intelligence about 20 years ago, he brought empathy to the forefront and emotional intelligence to the forefront. Now, what does that mean? Zoomed in, the feel lens, first of all, is how do I feel? Because if you don't notice how you feel, you've got static in the receiver. Second, zoomed in, feel would be standing in someone else's shoes. Can you be empathic? Do you know how they feel? And zoomed out, I think of the feel lens as something like, what sense do you want people to have of your brand? So is Starbucks different from Dunkin' Donuts? It's a difference in feel, right? That would be a brand difference. How do you want your customer to feel? In a culture sense, which I work with a lot inside of a company, inside of an organization like Rotary, what you're doing is creating a feel culture by your process, by your procedures, by your commitments, by your principles. All of that creates a culture, and that's feel zoomed out. So that's that concept of how are people going to feel about the culture, about the brand. And then we have witness. Now, witness, really isn't a corporate concept, and I mainly work in corporations, but I like witness maybe because of that, it brings attention to things like presence, mindfulness. Zoomed in witness. Do you ever have somebody come storming in your office and sit down and you've got one great piece of advice and another great piece of advice and it's not working? Does that ever happen? Because they don't really want advice yet. But you want to be helpful. And here's the great thing. Bearing witness can be so helpful and so healing. Because people really just sometimes need to be heard. And I particularly love a story in Scott Peck's book, The Road Less Traveled. He was a new minister, a young minister, and one of his parishioners' husbands had died. And he didn't really have the maturity to come up with anything to say, to come up with any solution. He didn't know what to do. So he sat with the widow into the night, past midnight, into the dawn. And finally she says, okay, I think I can face the day. And he left feeling incompetent. And years later, she said to him, you will never know how much that meant to me, that you sat with me all night long. So that's witness zoomed in. It's that sense, sometimes, I'm sure you've all had it, sometimes you're in a meeting and you're caught in the gossip and you're caught in the drama, and other times you're kind of looking as if from a balcony. So that's that concept of witness. In the zoomed out version of witness would be things like recycling, caring about the planet. It would be things like finding a way to help high school kids go to summer school or get an internship. It would be thinking about how they might be trained to be employees for you down the road. Witness meaning stepping back out of the immediate work, the immediate detail, and thinking about where could we go with this? What's the bigger impact? What's the social impact? So now I'd like you to take a minute and again at your tables, think about what's your strength, what's your go-to lens. We all do all of them. We all can think, act, feel, and witness. But usually we have one that's strong, one that we start with. So at your tables, in your pairs or new pairs, talk about which lens do you really know you can rely on for yourself when you have a decision.
Which lens?
There were five.
Yeah, how many have we got who start with think? How many people start with think? Okay.
Time's up, guys.
How many of you start with think?
A story to tell you about that.
Yeah, I think I still.
Okay. And how about act? How many start with act?
It depends on the situation.
That's right. That's what Donna was saying. Yeah, it can, but a lot of people have a strength that kind of where they begin. How about feel? How many people start with feel? Okay, and we've got some witness, right? All right. So I would say now that you've got the recipe, so the recipe is zooming in and out, and the 4 lenses. I would say that we've always loved new perspectives because think about kids, right? They love standing upside down, jumping, spinning, looking upside down even. This is the London Eye, looking over the city of London. Why do that? Only because it's fun to have a new perspective, and there's something childlike and inventive and imaginative about changing perspective. So here's a little something to think about perspective. So now we're going to apply this in the real world. We're going to make the case for flexible focus. And you may recall, now that my props have been prematurely revealed to you, you may recall there was an incident about a year and a half ago with United Airlines. And they created a situation where the entire plane was full, all people got on the plane, and then they realized, oops, we need to get 4 crew members from Chicago to Louisville. Now, they kind of got stuck, didn't they? They got stuck on one solution. What was their one solution?
Make seats.
Drag somebody out of the plane. So, when companies get stuck in a fixed focus, they don't really necessarily make the optimal decision, the optimal choice. So how could we help them out here? Well, the need was, we need seats to get 4 crew members to Louisville. Were there other options? Of course there were. So if we start with a think lens, they could have decided, let's rethink the maximum allowable. Do you remember what they offered?
No.
$800. Who wants to get off this plane for $800? Do you know what they did after the disaster? They can go up to 1,000, 2,000, 3,000. Anybody want to get off for 3,000, 4,000? They are now authorized to go up to 10,000. Now, that doesn't mean they'll get there. Somebody might accept 12 or 22. But at that time, they did not reevaluate the offered compensation. They didn't, of course, evaluate the cost of dragging somebody off the plane or consider whether the policies needed to be logically reevaluated. All of those would have been zoomed in the think lens. Zoomed out in the think lens would have been the logical impact of violently removing someone, evaluating the future impact. So there was a lot of future impact they had to present in front of the Federal Aviation Commission, and they really had to do a lot, but they didn't do it in that moment, or assess the potential financial cost to the company long term. Now, the day after this happened, the CEO initially said, oh, they did the right thing. The stock dropped 4%, which was, at that time, I looked up their net asset value, was $140 million that their stock value dropped. So I'm here to make the case for flexible focus. Because when you get stuck, it's not just nice to be more creative, it's financially viable. Now, your turn. So I'm going to ask this side of the room to be group 1 and have you zoom in on the ACT lens. And this table's bigger, so you're going to zoom out on the ACT lens. Now, you're going to pretend that you are the crew in Chicago, the stewardesses and the airline pilots in Chicago, and you're going to be more flexible and figure out what can we do about getting crew to Louisville. So you guys take a minute or 2 to zoom in on ACT, and you guys zoom out on ACT. And your job is to come up with options, so they're not stuck with dragging someone down the aisle.
Into the crew from somewhere else other than.
All right, so what does the zoomed in group have as recommendations?
Bigger plane.
That's not big enough?
From Charlotte.
All right, so we're going to hear from the zoomed in people first. What are your recommendations?
No, it's your club. I'm not
What are your options?
Well, I think, first of all, you can, I forget what we said, we can see if there's other transportation available to get there. So
Okay.
other airplanes, so what we think
Yeah.
buses. We think ground transportation will probably be too far for the crew to get there in time, so that probably is not a good option. And then we thought about, can they get other crews in from elsewhere,
Yeah,
to solve the problem
okay,
into Louisville. So.
okay. You guys have anything else?
We were on the same line.
Okay,
Just they know how to move people by
Yeah.
air.
They
Right.
can plan better.
yeah.
Plan better, right?
So how about the zoomed out? What are the options you came up with?
Pretty much those.
Similar. So thinking big picture, getting out of the narrow kind of policy limitations. He actually used his think lens too and looked up the number of hours to drive.
Yeah, 4 hours and 43 minutes.
Oh,
So it would be possible.
Oh, was that?
Right.
Is Louisville,
Opportunity to do that,
Kentucky?
yeah.
Chicago to Louisville, Kentucky?
And zooming in or zooming out would also be other airlines. Yeah.
And just plan better, like keep track of where you have to move people. That's a bigger.
Well, and stop them at the gate. They never should have, loaded the plane without stopping them at the gate. All right, so now you've got the hang of it. So one of the costs I forgot to mention is that the guy they dragged settled without a jury trial. He had a lawyer who represents passengers against airlines. He settled for an undisclosed amount. So your guess is as good as mine, but
Probably more than $25,000.
yeah. So the zoomed in, as you said, could also be to review the overbooking guidelines, to pay more, to call Louisville, maybe there's already crew there, the zoomed out, call another airline, cancel a flight. Why couldn't they have canceled a flight, right? That's possible, they just didn't even think.
Cancel the flight and then say, all you people except you four.
Right. And then they totally eclipsed the field lens, right? They didn't check in with themselves. How would I feel about being dragged down the aisle? They didn't check in with the passengers. And the witness lens, they totally did not pay attention to. Other costs were, they paid every passenger, they reimbursed every passenger on that flight. Of course, they paid the injured passenger. A lot of people wouldn't fly them for a while and the stock value dropped. So in the interest of ending on time, let me just say that we're all proficient at all of these lenses: think, act, feel, and witness. We're all able to zoom in and out. You are not stuck. And I just happen to have a couple of copies of the book. And it's one of the leadership tools that I use, because I really believe that if you have a good day at work, your department runs better, your company runs better, and you bring that home to your family and your community. You bring that sense of having had a satisfying day. So thanks for playing along, thanks for thinking with me, and thanks for having me.
Is it 8 o'clock?
It is.
It is, okay.
And I do have some little flyers.
I guess you're supposed to ring the bell, huh? Frank, can you ring the bell?
I'm reading a book called Death by Meaning.
That's it, folks.